So this is true that Topher Grace, while playing the role of David Duke in this movie, was so distressed by it that he spent his free time re-editing and cutting the Hobbit trilogy into a 2-hour movie. That's how stressed out he was playing this part, and all that to say, this is not a light movie to watch. BlacKkKlansman is the latest movie directed by Spike Lee. It stars John David Washington, who, yes, that is the son of Denzel Washington, Adam Driver, Laura Harrier, Topher Grace, like I said, just an all-star cast. The premise of this movie is based loosely off a true story of the first black police officer in Colorado Springs. During the 70s, being the first black police officer, there was still much racism in this town and even in the police force itself. So the main character in this movie, Ron Stallworth, decides to go undercover and infiltrates the local Ku Klux Klan. In doing so, he actually talks to David Duke on the phone multiple times, and apparently that actually really happened in real life, which is so crazy to me. So already, by that plot alone, this movie is ridiculous. Going into it, I wasn't really sure what to expect. I kind of assumed maybe to go along the comedy route. There are definitely parts of this movie that are funny and you will laugh out loud. But I cannot emphasize enough how deep this movie actually goes. And it raises these themes that I'm still thinking about even a week after I saw the movie. I will say this, it's very political. And not just political, because I think for the most part we can all agree that the Ku Klux Klan is not a good thing. But political in the sense where it connects it to modern day politics. And it's just kind of pointing a finger in your face, making sure you understand the connection. But for me, I think it worked. Most movies, I would not be on board with that. But for this movie, I think it was absolutely necessary to do. For example, the dialogue in this movie is very intentional, and it's lines that our president today uses, and they use it back in the 70s to kind of show how things aren't that different. So basically, if you do genuinely support most of what Trump does right now, I don't think you're going to enjoy this movie. But if you do disagree with him, or even find conversation within the politics he supports, this movie is going to be enjoyable. While watching a movie like this, you kind of expect it to be like that in some fashion, because that's the point about watching a movie that's based off of history. You're supposed to watch it, you're supposed to learn from it, you're supposed to connect how we are making the same mistake today, and this movie just takes that and pushes it even farther. It shoves it in your face. It makes you think that we are still living in the exact same way. And whether or not that's true, that's kind of up for the audience to decide, but obviously with that being the director's intention with this movie, it very much succeeded in doing that. Some other things I liked about this movie was I love the cast in it. John David Washington does a fantastic job, and I do want to see him do more films in the future. Adam Driver, once again, is so funny to watch on screen, and Topher Grace surprisingly does an amazing job as well. So after this film was released, there was some conversations going on about the direction that the film went. And I'm not going to go into spoilers at all, so don't worry about that. But Boots Riley, who directed Sorry to Bother You, was another film that premiered this summer, and it kind of touched on a few of the same issues that this film does as well. More so with minorities in the workplace and capitalism as a whole, but it does touch on racism a little bit. Boots Riley criticized this movie about being too easy on the police. So within this movie, there's a lot of racist cops. The whole system is kind of corrupt against black people. But at the end, there's kind of this redemptive arc for the police unit. They don't really specifically address the racism, but they're more of the heroes of this story against the Ku Klux Klan. So what Boots Riley was suggesting is that this wasn't the case in history. And this is the truth in the film and real life as well, but the police actually deleted all the records of this undercover sting. So basically, the real Ron Stallworth, we're left with his testimony to attest to what actually happened. And so the trend that history does say is the police probably were not against the Ku Klux Klan as this movie likes to make us think they were, and they weren't the heroes of the story. But I actually love that this conversation is happening because it's a very similar one that happens within the movie. So along with the Ku Klux Klan, another group featured in this film is the Black Panthers. And Ron Stallworth in this movie just deals with this issue of being black and also being a police officer. He begins this relationship of someone who is within the Black Panther organization, and he doesn't even tell her that he's a police officer for probably the first half of the movie. And the reason why is basically the Black Panthers were against almost all the police, at least portrayed in this movie. Before he reveals to her that he's a cop, they even have this debate of whether or not a black person should be a police officer. It's this conflicting view because she believes you need to be outside the organization to fix it, and he's trying to fix it from within. And it feels very similar to what Boots Riley is trying to say, where he feels like Spike Lee has chosen the side of the cops, like they are the ones to fix the system, but he's looking more big picture, and you're gonna have to fight racism from the outside. But for me personally, I thought the movie did a good job of handling both sides. Yes, the police ultimately come out as the heroes in this story, but you see this internal struggle that Ron Stallworth has in the movie of trying to be black, but also in a white group of police officers. For him, he knows he's doing the right thing by taking on the Ku Klux Klan, and it breaks his heart that other black people don't see it as such. The other theme I loved about this movie is another conversation that he had with his girlfriend in this film. They begin talking about blaxploitation movies. And if you don't know what blaxploitation is, it's essentially a genre within the 70s of movies that were created to be marketed to African Americans. Movies like Shaft and Superfly really helped this genre progress. And for a lot lot of African Americans, they view these films as being important to their culture. But the other side of the argument is it was Hollywood marketing specific movies to a demographic. And a lot of times there's negative stereotypes reinforced in these movies. And so the conversation that they have in BlacKkKlansman is Ron Stallworth is telling her, like, these are just movies, they're just fun. And she kind of takes it more like, no, they are saying something about us, and they are very intentional in saying something about us. And the movie goes along with this idea several times. It talks about Gone with the Wind and how a lot of people don't realize how significant that was on race. And it goes even harder with the movie Birth of a Nation. And if you don't know Birth of a Nation, it's essentially known as the first blockbuster movie in America. This movie was a huge success, and it really made Hollywood what it is today. It was the first movie shown in the White House, and the president at the time even quoted this as being historically accurate. But the problem is it wasn't. It portrayed black people in such a negative light as criminals, as rapists, as murderers, and it made the KKK the heroes of this movie. They were the ones to come and save the day, to save all the white people from the black criminal. And most historians today will point to Birth of a Nation as the rising of the Ku Klux Klan. Now during the Civil War they exist, yes, but they kind of died down, and in the early 20th century this movie is really what helped them kick it off again. So again, not going into spoilers, but there's a scene where Ron Stallworth is watching the KKK watch this movie, and this realization to him that all of a sudden, this isn't just a movie, but this movie created a culture. And what I love about that conversation, first off, is that it's true. A lot of people like to say that art is formed based off of culture, but they don't really acknowledge that culture is also just as much based off of art. There's so many mediums such as music and film and television and books, and when a big enough project is released, it has the power to shape culture just like the Birth of a Nation did. And when something like that happens, it's so much more than just a film. And that's how I felt watching BlacKkKlansman. For the first half, you're laughing. You're laughing at the Ku Klux Klan because they're absolutely ridiculous, and you're laughing in a dark way because why are they doing it? They throw out many racial slurs in this movie, and it really makes you uncomfortable. But then you kind of start to chuckle just because, like, oh, that's so ridiculous. But the farther this movie goes along, the more you realize this isn't just a movie, but this is reality. There are people out there who are still racist. There are people out there a part of the Ku Klux Klan. And this movie just drives it home. It hits hard. The last 2 minutes of this movie, I don't think I've ever heard a movie theater more silent. You will walk out of this movie realizing that this isn't just a movie. I think it's a good conversation to have. And whether or not you agree with what this movie is saying, we can at least converse about it and discuss and say why we disagree. And I hope that this movie causes conversations for that. So BlacKkKlansman, I absolutely love this movie. I think everyone needs to go see this movie. Please comment below if you have seen it or if you want to see it. I'd love to hear your feedback on it. And I will see you next time.